Hello, I'm Kristopher Dahir. It is good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. And if this is your first time, this is called Finding Your South. If this is something you're continuing listening to, thanks for joining us again. I do want to remind you what this podcast is about. It's about you discovering your journey, how you're going to walk it out. But I share some of my stories, some principles, some things that I think are valuable that you can hold on to or at least apply to your life. And I know I apply them to mine. And we are in the middle of a conversation regarding conflict resolution, and we use the idea of diamond moments. And just to remind you what we're talking about, it's the idea that if you looked on that side of the diamond and I looked from this side of the diamond and we tried to see the same thing, it's impossible because we have different perspectives. And with that said, you're going to have all kind of diamond moments in your life. And so far in this series, we talked a little bit about whether conflict is good or bad, or how do you approach it. And then in our last series, we talked a little bit about some of the different approaches, whether it's avoidance or coming in and finding compromise, or what is it? How do you handle those things? And we'll talk about those here for a minute as well. Now, I want to dive in talking about this and just some of the different skill sets that people bring to the table, because I know whenever I talk about conflict, I can tell people tend to already kind of in their mind say, well, this is who I am, this is how it was my experience, this is what I've done. And I think those are important. Don't set them aside for this conversation. Instead, let's apply them. So whatever your skills, your background, your education, your culture, which also play a huge role in this, how you saw your parents handle conflict, your nationality, your beliefs, your faith, those experiences. Now, I say all that not just because they're always positive. It's important you realize where you're coming from, because maybe you're approaching that diamond in a fashion that you have glasses on that you can't see what's really there because of some of those things, or maybe you see it crystal clear. I'm not here to tell you, but you get to discover what pieces of that are there. I do want to remind you we're over here, and we are at Lighthouse Coffee, some very dear friends of mine. If you are in the area of the Reno, Sparks, Washoe County area, there's quite a few different coffee places that you can go, but Lighthouse Coffee is number one for me. The other thing I want to tell you, they just got a coffee cart that's going to be around soon, and right now it's kind of local at their place, but I'll tell you what, it's pretty cool. If you want some great coffee, I recommend you going there, and we thank them for letting us use their place to record these. So in my life, just to tell you a little bit about me, if you didn't know and you're just joining us for the first time, I'm 52 years old. I've been on this earth. I've been married for coming up on 32 years. I'm a father of 30 years. I'm going to be a grandfather any moment now, literally. I have one grandchild, and my daughter-in-law is due any moment. And so with that said, I'll have two grandkids. I've been a pastor for 30 years, a professor for 10 years, and city council with all the different duties of being on boards for the last 8 years. I share all that not because I want you to somehow go and reminisce, but I want you to know that I understand conflict, that I've been in conflict, I've walked in conflict, I've been the problem with conflict. I've also been the resolutionary person who can come in and help guide people to have some better answers. And so whatever you bring to the table, it's important you realize, again, that you bring something solid, something worth listening to, but you have responsibility to also slow down enough to process who you are. I know for a fact, for me, knowing my background, when I approach something, I have a certain lens that I'm looking at it, and you may not understand my lens, and that could be our conflict right there, that we just can't see the same thing. We might be looking at the same thing, we just see it differently because of what we're looking through. And so we want to go through how to handle conflict. We can go through some definitions here in a moment, but I want to remind you of this as well. You need to answer this question if you haven't answered it yet, and I go back really to our first series 1. It talks about, is it negative or positive, and how do you find that, and how do you really believe that? I believe that conflict is neutral, and that means that it doesn't necessarily have bad qualities, it doesn't necessarily have great qualities, it just is neutral, and it depends what you bring to the table when it comes to that conflict. We did talk a little bit about Kilman, theory of conflict, and there's a few others out there, but there's a great questionnaire if you wanted to find out where you sit and who you are. Now let's get to the meat of conflict, because that's what I've promised for the last 2 times together. Conflict is the idea that two lines intersect each other. I know that seems like, well, why don't you just say that in the beginning? Because most people think of conflict like two bombs ready to go, and we're going to explode, and everyone's going to die, and there's going to be a survivor and a not a survivor. That is not how conflict has to be unless you bring a bomb to the table. And that could be you or them or whatever. But if we just hit each other, we're walking down the aisle, and I need to get to the other side, and you're in my way, that means we can have conflict. Now, easily, we either could do a dance, we could step beside each other, we could wait for each other. There's so many ways to handle this conflict, and it all depends on who we are and what we're going to do. So again, conflict is not negative, but it really is two people that are crossing paths and see things just a little different. Now, if you think about that, you have conflict every day of your life. This conversation can affect the outcome of your day, whether it's good or bad or great or even greater, depending how you walk after it. Another word I want you to just understand is the word resolution. Now, understand this, that answers doesn't mean, and having a resolution doesn't mean that you agree with each other. Because I think some people are waiting for conflict resolution for you to sit back and find that your wife just agrees with everything you just said. You're going to be sitting there for a very, very long time. So I would challenge you to stop and think about what resolution is. It means that you've laid on the table who you are, and you've listened to who they are, and you've kind of come up with a path forward. Again, it does not mean that you agree with each other, but it means that we're going to have a path forward, even if we only know 2 steps. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes people think resolution is that we've laid it out, and from here and forever, we know how we're going to go forward. That's just not actually true either. Because along that path, even if you agree to things, you both change. And as you get closer to something, just like this diamond, the closer you get closer to it, I'm going to see different things. I'm going to learn different things. I actually might even be able to understand your perspective better. And so together we can get stronger and better. But those are diamond moments. You know, when I do workshops on this, I actually hand out an actual diamond. It's actually fake. When I say an actual diamond, it's plastic. But I hand it out, and people keep it on their desk just to remember when someone comes in and they have conflict, it's up to them how they're going to handle that. But resolution does not mean someone agrees with you or you agree with them. So when you come into that conversation, it does not mean you have to give away everything or you have to accept everything or they have to accept everything themselves. Now, the other one I want to talk about, because I want to make sure you get this definition very well, is value. I don't believe that we can have our diamond moment go well without value. And the reason I say that is that, first of all, if you don't value yourself, like I value my opinions, I value who I am. So when I come to that table, I know who I am and I have something to share. But I also value the person on the other side of that table. I believe I can be smarter if I could just hear what they have to say. I mean, imagine that you and I, we walk up to a moment and you are looking at something and I am looking at something. And I come up and I know what I see. I know who I am. I know my values. I know the things that are important to me. And so I'm sharing them with you. And all of a sudden you start sharing and I'm all, I disagree with you. I can't see what you see. So if we could slow down enough, maybe we both can be smarter by the end of the conversation. Now, trust me, again, like we said, resolution doesn't mean I have to agree with everything you see. It just means I'm willing to listen, and then together we can forge a path forward and how that's going to function. Now, remember, our thing's called finding your south because sometimes it requires you not to walk the normal path, but to actually walk through the bushes, walk through the thistles, and walk through things that are difficult. But that's reality. Sometimes you have to forge your own path, but that's not just you, but that's also with other people. Our culture doesn't always let us easily walk with somebody because they make definitions of things. But I promise you this, if you want to have a life that is full, filled with value, filled with fun, even filled with new friends, it's going to require you, I'd say this, to even just stay married for a length of time. It's going to require you to forge your way through some difficult conversations. But I'll tell you, it's worth every moment of it. And as you get to celebrate life together, it means you slow down enough to understand how to value somebody else. A lot of times people have conflict, and what they're doing is in that conflict, they act like they're listening, but what they're actually doing the whole time is loading their gun, waiting for the person to stop speaking so they can blow them away with their wisdom and knowledge and all that stuff. So in the very end, that's not value. That's not valuing anybody, and you're not a learner at that point. But if you want to be a learner, you got to set down the gun. Come on, everybody, set it down. Back away from it for a second. Let that person speak, and then maybe even repeat back to them what you heard. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes people speak and we don't get it. And so that's something important we hear. Or maybe you spoke and they're not getting it. And then if you need to come back and say, it's my turn to talk, I'm going to share with you now what I hear. Now that does slow down sometimes, that conversation. You don't get to go through these conflicts like that. But I can guarantee that at the end you're going to be at a much better place because you didn't just go off the handle on a conversation. That brings us to this next word, is communication. And I know we're doing definitions right now, and you're like, I just want to get to the core of conflict. But you got to have these down so you can actually have conflict correctly. Now, communication is what people think many times because they spoke, they communicated. I want to tell you that's not called communication, that's called you speaking, you yelling, or you proclaiming. So if I came up and said, I am leaving the room, that's a proclamation. Now, if I came up and said, hey, I'm going to leave now, are you okay with that? Or do you understand? Do you hear what I have to say? And then they say, yeah, I'll see you later. So when I hear back from them, now we have communication. A lot of times government entities, they get up and they proclaim things thinking they communicated, but the truth is they only proclaimed. A lot of times parents do this. A lot of times husbands and wives do this. Managers do this a lot. They put out a memo and they're like, well, I communicated. Well, I want you to know if you did not hear back from those people, I don't call that communication. And so when we're walking down this road of conversation about conflict, maybe you're creating your own conflict unnecessarily because you're not actually communicating. The other word I want you to know is this word perspective. I've used it a few times, but it really is just the idea that you can see differently than I. So let's say that I'm standing all the way over on the other side of the room and I'm looking at something. Now let's say there's a wall in the way and this and that. I guarantee I can see what you can't see. So if you were smart, you'd yell out to me and say, hey, is there somebody over there? And I could see it because you can't see it. And I'd say the same thing to you. I don't see anybody over here, but do you see someone over there? And maybe there is, and I couldn't see him because my perspective's askewed. That happens in life every day. And if we work together as a team, we have a better picture of how to approach things, how to see things. And so that is a crucial element as well. So a diamond moment. The best definition that I can give to a diamond moment, can you look through the eyes of somebody else when it comes to conflict? Can you see what they have to see? Can you value someone enough to set down all the things you think you know, all the wisdom you have to see what needs to be seen? Now, what are some of these diamond moments in your life? Today, you're going to have some. And today, I'm going to ask you to apply some of those things we just talked about. Some of those things are crucial. Some of those definitions are crucial. Will you take a moment and say, today I'm going to slow down enough to try to view whatever conflict we're having through the eyes of the person I just crossed paths with? Now, if you say yes to this, I want you to know you're in for a crazy day because it is different. A lot of times we walk through life, someone disagrees with us, someone runs in front of us. I mean, put it this way, you might even be on your way to work right now and someone just cuts you off. Now, you might get mad and angry, but what if that man has a woman in the back who's pregnant and he's running to the hospital? What if he's in trouble and he needs help and he's heading to get help? You wouldn't mind that if he cut you off, but because you don't know what's going on, sometimes we get angry. And so something to think, slow down, look at the situation. Don't get me wrong, sometimes people are just jerks. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people are just making bad decisions. However, don't let it ruin your life even with that said. Slow down and look at the whole situation. React. Reaction is always a problem instead of responding. When you respond, you slow down, you look what's going on instead of just reacting to what's happening. So we're going to continue in this conversation. I hope you're having a good time. We're talking about diamond moments. Our next session together, we're even going to get deeper into what you see, how to handle it, how to look at it. But today, I hope that you say yes to that challenge. That yes, I will take each moment and make it a diamond moment. So we're here, finding yourself, discovering how you can apply our conversation to your life. Have a great day. Hope to see you next time.